So now that we have seen the structure of our intent class, let's talk about how you use these intents to start the activities. If you remember our last lecture, I've already talked about how you can programmatically start an activity using the methods such as start activity or start activity for result. Now when you use one of these methods, Android has to figure out which single activity it's going to start up. And there are two ways in which Android does this. The first way is that if you explicitly name the target activity when you created the intent, then Android can just look that up and start the specific activity. The second way, which is only used if you haven't explicitly set the target activity, is that Android can implicitly determine it based on the intent that was used and based on the properties of the activities that you have installed on your device. Recall the example of your previous lecture, the simple calculator version 1 and version 2. In these examples, we have started activity explicitly because we know the name of the activity that can perform our desired operation, and that is calculator activity. Okay, let's quickly look at an example from our previous lecture to understand the concept of explicit intent. I will not go into the details of this example because we have already discussed all this in our previous lecture. Let's go straight to the point and see that how explicit intent works. Okay, here you can see that I have created an intent, an empty intent, and then I have used one of the component methods set class to set the name of the activity that can perform the operation, and that operation is that we want to perform some mathematical operation on two numbers. When the intent is created, I am using the method start activity and I am passing this created intent into it. Now what will happen is that when I call this start activity method, Android system will analyze this intent and check whether a specific component is set that can handle this kind of operation. And if it is set, then Android system will start that specific component passing the intent data into this. And this is how the process of explicit intent works. The second way to start an activity is by implicit activation. In this situation, you haven't told Android which activity to start, so it has to figure it out on its own. And what happens here is that Android tries to match the intent that was passed into start activity or start activity for result methods by comparing it to intent filters based on three aspects: action, data, and category. If the intent matches an intent filter, the system starts that component and delivers it the intent object. When there is more than one app that can respond to your implicit intent, the user can select from the chooser dialog which app to use and make that app the default choice for the action. However, if multiple apps can respond to the intent and the user might want to use a different app each time, you should explicitly show a chooser dialog. This process is called intent resolution. To make things clear, let's look at an example showing at the left. In this example, activity A creates an implicit intent using the method setAction, and then it passes that intent into start activity. This intent will be received by Android system. Android system will check what kind of activities can handle such type of action. And if Android system finds that there is only one activity that can handle this action, then Android system will start that activity and will pass the intent to that activity. And if Android system finds that there are multiple activities that can handle such action, then Android system will display a chooser dialog so that user can select from multiple activities to handle the desired operation. When the user selects a single activity from the chooser dialog, that activity will be started by Android system and the intent will be passed to that activity. Intent resolution relies on two kinds of information. First, there is the intent that the calling activity created to describe the operation that it wants to be performed. And second, individual Android activities specify intent filters, which describes the kinds of operation or intents that they can handle. And this information is usually placed in Android manifest file or the applications to which the activities belong. At runtime, when the start activity method is actually called, Android will try to match the intent with the intent filters that it knows about. However, it's only going to use part of the intent information when it does this matching. Let's take a look at how applications specify intent filters within their Android manifest files. Here is an XML snippet showing an activity tag, and this activity tag includes within it an intent filter tag. That intent filter tag includes an action tag. This action tag corresponds to the intent action that this activity can support. For example, if an activity can dial phone numbers, then it should include an intent filter with the standard action. If your activity handles a specific type of data, it can add that information to its intent filter as well. Similarly, activities can specify categories for the intent they handle. If you want your activity to be implicitly called, you must name the category as default. Let's look at an example that puts all of this together. In this example, I have created an application with two buttons, Open Dialer implicitly and Open Dialer explicitly. When I click Open Dialer implicitly, Android system will implicitly match the activity against the action dial and then start the default activity that is associated with that action. But when I click the button Open Dialer explicitly, then Android system will open the dialer activity that I have created in this application. Let's look at our main activity class. In this activity, you can see that I have created two methods, open explicit, open implicit. These two methods act as listeners for the buttons that I have created in this application. When I click the button open dialer explicit, this method will be called. And in this method, you can see I have created an empty intent. Then I have used the component method set class and I am specifying the class dialer activity that I have created in this application. And then I am setting some data for this intent and then I am starting the activity by passing this created intent. Android system will just start this dialer activity, this specific dialer activity and pass the intent data into it. But when I press the open dialer implicitly button, then here you can see I have created an empty intent and then instead of specifying a specific class, I am using the method setAction, and in that method I am using the string intent.action underscore dial. Now when I start this activity, Android system Android system will match all the activities against this action and will open the default dialer activity that is associated with this action. Let's use this application and see what happens when each button is clicked. First, I click the first button, open dialer implicitly. When I click this button, Android system will open the default dialer application. Here, Android system opens the default dialer application, and I can now use this dialer app to dial a phone number. Let's dial this. Okay, now when I click the second button, open dialer explicitly, Android system will open the dialer activity that I have created in this application. So let's click this button. Now this is the dialer activity that I have created for this application. Now let's press this dial button and see what happens. Okay, here is the code for the dialer activity class. You can explore this code and see what is happening in this code. But there are some things that you may or may not understand at the moment. And when I want to start the dialer activity, I have to create an intent and set the class for the dialer activity. So the question here is that can I can I create an implicit intent for this dialer activity? And the answer is yes, we can. To start our dialer activity implicitly, first we have to add an intent filter tag in our Android manifest file. So let's go to the Android manifest file and add an intent filter tag. Okay, in this Android manifest, you can see there is a tag related to our dialer activity. In this tag, we have to add the intent filter tag. So let's add an intent filter tag. In this intent filter, the first tag will be action. In this action, in the name field, we will add the name for this action. This name will be used to implicitly call the dialer activity. To give the name for this intent filter, first select the package name, and this naming scheme is recommended to avoid any conflicts. The package name and then any name any name comes into your mind. I just call it my dialer. The next tag will be the category. Here I will set the category as default. Then the third tag is the data, and for the data I will select the scheme as I will be using the scheme telephone. So here we have created an intent filter tag inside our activity tag, and now let's check whether this is working or not. Let's go to our main activity. Here in this main activity, instead of using set class, I will use the method set action, and here I will use the name of this intent filter, the name of the action of the intent filter that I have created in the manifest. Okay, let's now run this application and see what happens. We are running the application. Now when I press open dialer explicitly, let's see what happens. Here you can see the dialer activity is started, but this time implicitly, not explicitly. If you want your dialer app to appear in the chooser dialog of the Android system for the action dial, then you have to add another intent filter tag in your dialer activity. So let's create another intent filter tag. I'll just copy this intent filter tag that I have created earlier, paste it here. And now in the action name, I will use android.action intent.action.dial. Now I have created an intent filter for my dialer activity, which adds it to the chooser to the list of activities that can respond to the action dial. Okay, let's now check whether this is working or not. Okay, now when I press open dialer implicitly, a chooser dialog should appear. Okay, here you can see a chooser dialog appears, and there is the dialer app that Android provides, and here is the dialer app that I have created. So let's just click my dialer app, and here you can see I have used the chooser dialog to select my dialer app for this action. The last topic of our lecture is pending intent. A pending intent object is basically a wrapper around an intent object. The primary purpose of pending intent is to grant permission to a foreign application to use the contained intent. For example, when an SMS service receives an SMS message on your mobile phone, it creates a pending intent and generates a notification in your notification area. When you click that notification, SMS activity opens and that pending intent is transferred to that SMS application activity.